You are the only person I've ever been late for starting a podcast. So I made damn sure today that I'd be on early. How are you?
Fantastic. I'm good.
You look great.
I'm trying to figure out why I'm here.
It's been too long, and your perspective of the podcast, the Stay Off My Operating podcast, I think is fascinating. So it was a long time coming. I should have done it much sooner. But yeah, so excited to chat with you about your own kind of health journey and what it's been like co-hosting the show with Philip. I think you have just a different perspective than Philip would or some of the guests would. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, well, I'm a layman. I'm not an expert. And I I tell folks about, meet folks around town and mention, yeah, I co-host this podcast with this cardiac surgeon. And I feel like I've been getting like a master's level education in how to really take care of your health over the last 2.5 years that we've been doing the Stay Off My Operating Table podcast. And it's been it's a blast. I'm promiscuously curious and I love to ask questions because I love to learn. And it's a
Yeah.
great opportunity for me to get to talk to really interesting, knowledgeable people. And it happens to be, something that virtually everyone is interested in, staying healthy. So it's been a lot of
And some
fun.
of those people are teenagers, by the way.
Oh my gosh. Grace Price was Grace. I hope somebody sends you a copy of this or you see it. Wow. I have never talked to someone who left me so hopeful, so optimistic about the future. It was awesome.
That was amazing. Yeah, that was amazing. It was snowing sideways in Salt Lake City. It took me forever to get where I was going that day, and I remember exactly like where I was driving as this teenager's blowing my mind. So yeah, I'll cut this clip out and make sure I send it to her. I'm trying to get her on my show as well. But yeah, we'll be sure to talk about all of this in the actual episode.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I've tried to understand what was happening inside me um, as I'm listening to Grace because she didn't say anything that we haven't had experts say.
Right.
Um, but the fact that an 18-year-old high school student has done the work, has read the research, for God's sake, I haven't done that, and that ain't going to happen, I assure you. Um, and put two and two together, figured things
Yeah.
out, um,
Yeah.
and is passionate about communicating what she has learned to her peers.
Yes.
Um, wow, Grace,
Yeah.
I'm just I'm a huge fan. I really am.
Me too. Me too. It was cool. Like not only the depth, in particular, like cancer, but the breadth of the way she was able to explain other things to understand it to the level that then you could break it down in a way that her peers could understand. I think is such a gift and is such a, I mean, yeah, just
Yeah,
very well done on her part.
the other thing that really excited me was um, she's 18 years old. She's a high school senior, and she is talking to some of the leading cancer researcher in the world, Dr. Thomas Seyfried. She is talking to folks who are on the cutting edge of health research around the world. She's got the background and the education that they're willing to have that conversation with
That's
her.
right.
She's making a documentary, which maybe is less impressive to 18-year-olds today than it would have been to 18-year-old me, because I remember one of my good friends, his dad was an orthodontic surgeon, and he had a recording studio in his house, which back in those days, that was you had to make surgeon kind of money to afford a recording studio. Now, you need a $600 phone. Um, but but more than that, it was that grace is a living embodiment and demonstration of what our young adults are capable of. And an absolute refutation of the current educational system, which which is by and large graduating people who can barely read,
Yeah.
let alone think.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say she's not at the upper end of raw capability. I'm sure she is, but there are undoubtedly tens or even hundreds of thousands like her
Yeah.
whose ability, whose potential, whose talent, whose promise is being pissed away
Yep.
in a system that, that's frankly abusive.
Yep.
So I love to see people break free from the matrix.
Me too, man. It's kind of what I thought might happen. There's just a divergence. There's such a delta between, the generations that are being stacked on each other, eating the
Yeah.
same way, being schooled the same way, and just every generation is just more disadvantaged. And then there's this other subfraction that's sick of the bullshit and nonsense. They're listening to Rogan and they're getting their information not from the nightly news or the newspaper, and they do think differently, and that does give me a lot of hope too. So yeah, it's awesome.
Are you familiar with the work of Strauss and Howe? They wrote a book called, kind of what their biggie was, The Fourth Turning.
I don't think so. Strauss and Howe.
Um, Strauss and Howe. I can't remember their first names, but The Fourth Turning is the name of the book. It's a brilliant piece of work from the standpoint of uh, the mark of genius is to be able to connect apparently disconnected things in a way that makes sense and maybe
Mhm.
create something new. And I don't know if they're the first to observe this, but they at least made it famous. Their perspective is that at least Western civilization, and it's probably all of civilization, goes goes through these cultural cycles that are roughly the 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 length of a man's age in duration, roughly 80 years.
Mhm.
And these cycles have a waxing and a waning phase, just like the moon. And so they're kind of broken into the roughly these 20-year periods. And it sounds ludicrous when you say it that way, but if you look back over our history, look back 80 years from now, what was going on? World War II. What was going on 80 years before that? The Civil War. What was going on 80
Mhm.
years before that? The Revolutionary War. What was
Revolution.
going on 80 years before that? The at least in the Anglo-Saxon world, the Glorious Revolution. What was going on 80 years before that? That would that be about the 1620s. So that was
Yeah.
about the time that um, Charles and I think that was James the First and Charles the Second, and
Oh wow.
uh, uh, England was once again going through an upheaval. What was 80 years before that? The Reformation. I mean, it's
Wow.
insane.
Interesting.
And the poles of this cycle are extreme communitarianism on one end and extreme individualism on the other end. Um, the if we and the particular 80-year markers that I just selected are periods of extreme, we all have to do this together kind of stuff.
Interesting.
Um, and the oscillation between the poles of this cycle is driven by the extremes themselves. And so if we look at Grace Price, your listeners are going, what does this have to do with health? I don't know. I'm interested in it. If you look at Grace Price, at her generation, these are kids who are becoming adults at the end of the extremes of everybody has to get on board period. Um, if we look over the last 4 years of the mass cancellation, if you happen to hold an opinion and express an opinion that is contradictory to the dominant narrative, then you're a non-person. You don't count.
Yeah.
And these young adults have come of age in this, and they're saying, "Screw this,"
Yeah.
and it's going to go the other direction. I expect 40 years from now to look very much like um, the late 70s.
Interesting.
Um, now, to me, the late 70s were, I was a late high school, early college back then. That was, I don't
Uh, yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I'm gonna definitely use all of this. Let me get you formally introduced on the show so we can get rolling there.
know.
Um, so good, dude. I love chatting with you and hearing the way your brain works. It's one of my favorite parts of your podcast, honestly.